How you doing there? Welcome back to Babble on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Beis, Daf 92 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, we have a beautiful Daf here on Daf 92 of Masechta Menachos about Semicha, leaning on the animal before Shechita of a Korbin. Now we're not going to get into how Semicha is done. I hope that we will get into it a little later at least. But today it's about which korbanos requires semicha. Semicha is one of those things, kind of like nisachim that we were discussing. Was it yesterday? Which korbanos require nisachim? Now we're discussing which korbanos require semicha. We discussed recently which korbanos require tenufa. These are like all these like Facebook meta kind of things that are that come with the Korbin. Of course, we always think about a Korbin: take a sheep, slaughter it, offer it on the mizbeach. But there's also these kind of other steps. The tenufa, the semicha, the nisachim, and we're getting into those things, which is fun. It almost, in a sense, feels like, we learned, of course, Masechta Zvachim. We're getting towards the end of Menachos, and we're like almost like getting to all these like Facebook meta kind of things that we haven't gotten to yet, which is cool. So today we're gonna learn a Mishnah about which korbanos requires semicha. We'll discuss which public offerings require semicha. That's really going to be the bulk of today's daf. Machlekes Reb Shimon, Reb Yehuda, and then we will discuss which private offerings require semicha. That is the beautiful daf that we have today on Daf Beis, Daf 92 of Masechta Menachos. Friends, let's get right to it. All right, friends, we're on Daf Beis, Amud Aleph at the Mishnah, 3 lines into the page. Kol korbanos atzibor, all public offerings, ein bain semicha. No semicha, no leaning. Right? Semicha is you lean on the animal before shechita. None of that by public offerings. Chutz, 2 exceptions. Min hapar haba al kol hamitzvos, the par helim dover shel tzibor that we learned all about in Masechta Horayos, v'sari hamishtaleach, and the goat that is chucked off of a cliff on Yom Kippur. There is semicha on that goat. Those are the 2 exceptions for communal offerings. Those are the 2 communal offerings that have semicha. All other communal offerings don't have semicha. Reb Shimon disagrees. Avsar avodas kochavim, even the Sari Avodas Kochavim. So 2 things about this about this statement. First of all, he says even Sari Avodas Kochavim, which makes it seem like he agrees with the Tanna Kama and he's adding a 3rd scenario. From the Gemara, it would not seem that way. It would seem that he disagrees with the Tanna Kama. They agree when it comes to Parlam Dover Shel Tzibur. Everybody agrees that by Parlam Dover Shel Tzibur there's semicha because the Torah says that there is. The Psukim say by Parlam Dover Shel Tzibur that there is semicha. So that's undisputable. The machlokes in the Tanna Kama, which we're going to see in the Gemara, is Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon, is that Reb Yehuda says that the second instance of semicha by a communal offering is the Sari Mishtalech. According to Reb Yehuda, according to Reb Shimon, it is the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah. So it sounds like from the Mishnah that it's even. It's a 3rd example, but from the Gemara it would seem that it is instead of the Sari Mishtaleach. Reb Shimon disagrees and says that it is the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah. What is the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah, friends? So if you remember from Masechta Horayos, there's the Parlam Dover Shel Tzibor. That's, for example, the Chacham made a mistake and they said that a particular type of chaylev is permitted. It turns out that it's not, so everybody ate the chaylev, so bring a Parlam Dover Shel Tzibor. Siri Avodah Zarah is basically the same thing, but specific to Avodah Zarah. If the Chacham said it's okay to throw stones to Markulis, for whatever reason they passed him, there was mutter, everybody did it, turned out that they made a mistake, so then you bring a par le'ola and a sa'ir lechatos. That is the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah, and that is also brought for a similar instance like the Parlam Dover Shel Tzibur, when Bezdin had ruled that something related to Avodah Zarah is permitted, and all basically the same halachas of Parlam Dover Shel Tzibur apply to the Sari Avodah Zarah. Reb Shimon says that by the Sari Avodah Zarah, just like by the Parim Davar Shel Tzibor, there is Semicha there as well. According to Rishim, that's the second instance of Semicha by a communal offering. Kol Korbanos HaYachid, all private offerings, the opposite, Tunin Semicha. All private offerings, the owner will do Semicha. The owner will lean on the animal before Shchita. Chutz, 3 exceptions, Min HaBechor VaMaiser VaPesach. Bechor, Maiser, and Pesach, no Semicha. All other korbanos, Chatas, Osham, Ola, Shlomim, Toda, Semicha. Va'yoresh, somebody who is an inheritor. Excuse me 1 second. Take some water. Rashi says, for example, if you have Yaakov, he had set aside a sheep to be a Korbin Shlomim, right? He said, sheep, Sarah the ewe, I'm going to offer you as a Korbin Shlomim. And then Yaakov dies. So Reuven, his son, Sarah the ewe was already designated to be a Korbin Shlomim. So Reuven will offer Sarah the ewe as a Korbin Shlomim even after his father Yaakov dies. Somech umevi nisachim. The Reuven, so Yaakov had designated Sarah the ewe to be a Korbin Shlomim. Yaakov then died, so Reuven, his son, is going to offer Sarah the ewe as a Korbin Shlomim, and we're saying he will do Semicha. Reuven will do Semicha, lean on Sarah the ewe before slaughtering her. Umevi nisachim, he will also bring nisachim for Sarah the ewe. That would be an isarin of flour, a log of oil, 3 loaves of oil, and 3 loaves of wine. Umeimer and also Tmura would apply. If Reuven says to Sarah the ewe, you know what? Actually, I'm going to offer Rivka the ewe instead as the Korbin Shlomim. That would be Tmura, which would mean that both of them, both Sarah the ewe and Rivka the ewe, would be offered as Korbin Shlomims. Givaldig. No, so we saw that when it comes to communal offerings, the Parim Davar Shel Tzibor has Semicha. It's Machlokes Reb Yehuda and Reb Shimon about, is it the Sarah Mishtaleach or is it the Sarah Avodah Zarah that has Semicha? And by all individual offerings, there is Semicha, the 3 exceptions being Bechor, Meiser, and Paisich. Givaldig, another shluck of water, we'll go weiter. I hope I don't run out of water. I guess my throat is feeling a shtickle dry. Okay, friends, we are now going to delve into the machlokes between Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda. We're going to be delving on that and jamming on that for really the bulk of the meat of this daf. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Kol korbanos hatzibur, all communal offerings, ein boen semicha, have no semicha, chutz mipar abo al kol amitzvis, except for the Parim Davar Shel Tzibor, okay. V'siri avodas kucham de Reb Shimon, and the Sa'ir avodah zara, that is Reb Shimon's opinion. Remember, of course, the Sa'ir avodah zara, like we said, is essentially Parim Davar Shel Tzibor, but it's a goat, and it's for avodah zara specifically, as opposed to the Parim Davar Shel Tzibor, which is for all other averas. Averas that you would bring up Parim Davar Shel Tzibor for, right? That as chiyuv kare, zdonu kare, shigosu chatas. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Siri avodas koi chavim ein boen semicha. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Shimon and says, no, the Siri avodah zara does not have semicha. It doesn't say it in the Torah, and we are not going to learn it out any other way. There is no semicha by the Siri avodah zara, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Ve'esmi avi tachteim. Okay, well then, what is the second instance of semicha by a communal korbin? Sira mishtalech. The answer is the Sira mishtalech on Yom Kippur. We're going to get into the different some of the korbanos of Yom Kippur in just a moment. On Yom Kippur, of course, there are the 2 goats. The lots are drawn. One of them, whichever the lot determines, one of them will be the Sari LaHashem, will be offered Lifnai v'Lifnim, the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and the other will be chucked off a cliff. The one that's chucked off a cliff is, of course, called the Sari Mishtalech. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the Sari Mishtalech, there's Semicha for the Sari Mishtalech. Now, if you noticed, I'm sure many of us noticed, that Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Shimon. He says, no, the Sari Avodah Zarah doesn't require Semicha. Then what does he say? Okay, well, if the Sari Avodah Zarah does not require Semicha, what am I going to replace it with? What's going to be the second one that requires Semicha? It's the Sari Mishtalech. Why? So, Frekti Gemara, why did he need a second one? Okay, if you say that the Sari Avodah Zarah does not have Semicha, okay, so just the Pa'ilim Dover Shel Tzibur has Semicha. Why do I need a second example? It says, okay, well, if it's not the Sari Avodah Zarah, it'll be the Sari Mishtalech. Why do I need a second example? Ravina Gemire Shtei Smichas B'Tzibur, says Ravina, because we have Halach L'Moshe Misinai that there are two instances of Semicha by a Korbin Tzibur. And therefore, if the second, so the Pa'ilim Dover Shel Tzibur is, of course, the first example, because it says it directly in the Pesukim that there is Semicha. I think it says V'samchu Ziknei Eida or something. And if the second instance is not the Sari Avodah Zarah, so Rabbi Yehuda needed a second one. What's the second one? Sari Mishtalech. Reb Shimon. Now, Reb Shimon responds to Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says that the second instance is the Sari Mishtalech. Reb Shimon responds, says, V'aloi ein smicha ela b'bailim. However, Reb Shimon says, one second. Reb Shimon says, Rabbi Yehuda, the second instance of smicha by a communal Korbin, by a Korbin Tzibur, cannot be the Sari Mishtalech, because smicha has to be done by the owner of the Korbin. The owner of the Korbin is the one doing smicha. V'zeh ahar nuvaran of uvanav somchin bo. And the problem is, says Reb Shimon, that by the Sari Mishtalech, who's doing the smicha? Aharon and his children. I don't know why it says that his children are doing smicha on the Sari Mishtalech, but Aharon is doing smicha on the Sari Mishtalech. I don't know that his children do. But anyway, so Aharon is so the problem is, says Reb Shimon, it can't be that there's smicha by the Sari Mishtalech, because smicha needs to be done by the owner of the Korbin, and here it's Aharon who's doing the smicha. He's not the owner of the Korbin, of the Sari Mishtalech. On my Lord, to which Rabbi Yehuda says, I disagree. Av zeh Aharon uvanav miskapin bo, that Aharon and his children are also the beneficiaries, so to speak, of the Sar HaMishtalech, that the Sar HaMishtalech is for them as well. I want to talk about the Korbanos of Yom Kippur for a second, at least 3 of them, after I take a drink of water. Because that's going to help us understand what we've already been learning about in terms of the Sar HaMishtalech, and in terms of who owns it and who's shaykh to it, but also the Gemara is coming up. I want to talk about the Sar LaHashem and Sar LaAzazel of Yom Kippur. And I also want to talk about the Par Yom HaKippurim. Those 3 korbanos. Sheesh, I really hope I'm not going to lose my voice. As of now, I don't think I am. My voice is very dry. I'm going to have to pick up some honey from the store, and we're going to get back on the tea and honey. I can't. My voice just has not quite kicked it. Anyways, I'm drinking a lot of water. I don't need more water right now. Okay. Anyways, excuse me. I want to talk about the Sar LaHashem, Sar LaAzazel, and the Par Yom HaKippurim. So on Yom Kippur, there's a lot of korbanos that are offered. And among all those korbanos are these 3. Now, the Sar LaHashem is the Sar Yom HaKippurim, and the Par Yom HaKippurim, those are both offered in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Those are both right. Of course, on Yom Kippur, the big avoda, Aaron goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and he sprinkles the blood of the par, of the soyer. So the par and the soyer of Yom Kippur are both offered in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. What are their purposes? So the par Yom HaKippurim is mechaper for the Kohanim, for Aharon, the other Kohanim. The soyer Yom HaKippurim is mechaper for everybody else. Remember, the par and soyer of Yom Kippur, those are in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. And what are they mechaper for? If you remember from the first parak of Masechta Shavuos, it was a very technical parak. I had to do a little chazara this morning. Maybe technically last night, somewhere in between last night and this morning. The par v'sar of Yom Kippur, the whole avodah of Yom Kippur with the par and the sar and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and right, the whole thing is mechaper for something very specific. Tumas mikdash v'kadoshav. That's it. Tumas mikdash v'kadoshav. Sheyesh ba yediyah batchila ve'en ba yediyah basof. If a person touched the dead sheretz, he says, "Oh, dagnabit, I'm tamei." He forgets that he's tamei. He goes into the Beis Hamikdash. Tumas mikdash v'kadoshav. If he remembers, "Oh no, I was tamei. I went into the Beis Hamikdash." Korbin olav v'yored. As we know, Korbin olav v'yored is brought for Tumas mikdash v'kadoshav, whatever he can afford. But if he didn't remember, right, he touched the dead sheretz, he says, "Oh, dagnabit, I'm tamei," and he totally forgets. He goes into Beis Hamikdash, or he eats kachim. He hasn't remembered. He totally forgot that he was tamei. He has not yet remembered that he was tamei. So the par v'sar of Yom Kippurim, for that particular instance, will be what's called tole. Basically, we're saying, because as we said, if he remembers at some later point that he was tamei when he went into the Beis Hamikdash, so he has to bring up Korbin olav v'yored. But so long as he hasn't remembered, the par v'sar of Yom Kippurim will cover him so long as he doesn't remember, and he'll be all right. He doesn't have to worry about any own shin or anything like that. So that's the par v'sar of Yom Kippurim. The par is mechaper for Tumas Mikdash v'Kodosh of Sheish b'Yediyah batchila ve'en b'Yediyah basof for the Kohanim, and the Sa'ir, the goat, the Sa'ir LaHashem, does the same thing but for the Yisraels. One other important note is that by the par Yom Kippurim for the Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol does vidui. The Kohen Gadol does vidui. What do you call it? Vidui? Atonement or something? I feel like there's a word for vidui. Confession. Does confession on that. So the Kohen does confession on his cow, on the par Yom Kippurim, the cow of the Kohanim, not on the Sar LaHashem. But he does do confession, he does do vidur on the cow, but also on the Sar LaAzazel. There's confession on the Sar LaAzazel. The Sar LaAzazel is a second goat. That goat, I hope I didn't say sheep. If I said sheep, I meant goat, the two Seirim, the two goats. One is the Sar Yom Kippur, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The other one is the Sar LaAzazel. And that goat is for all the other sins. All the other sins that are not Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav. The Kohen Gadol does vidur, he does confession on the Sar LaAzazel. And then that Sar LaAzazel is taken out to a cliff, chucked off of the cliff with all of the sins of Am Yisrael. Amazing. And drink a little bit more water. So be'etzem on Yom Kippur, among the other offerings that are offered are the par Yom Kippurim, the Sar LaHashem, and the Sar LaAzazel. Let's go weiter. So far, what we have seen is that there was a machlokas be'etzem between Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda. Reb Shimon says to Reb Yehuda, how could it be that you, Reb Yehuda, are saying that the Kohen does semicha, that the Kohen Gadol does semicha on the Sar HaMishtaleach, But the Kohen Gadol, the owner needs to be doing smicha, and Aharon is not the owner of the Sarah Mishtalech. It's for all the Yisraels. It's for everybody else. It's not for the Kohanim. To which Rabbi Yehuda responds, and he says, "Ma pitom, I don't agree. While it's true that for Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashov, while it's true that for the Par Yom Kippurim, which is done in the Kodesh HaKodashim, specifically for Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashov, yes, the Kohanim have their Par, and they don't have the Sa'ir that all the other Jews have. But Rabbi Yehuda says, when it comes to the Sarah Mishtaleach, for all the other sins, and it says, what is it? Visvada alav. It says, Visvada olav es kol avonus b'nei Yisrael ves kol pesheim l'chol chatosum. All of the sins of Israel, other than Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashov, Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with Rabbi Shimon, and he says that all the Kohen, everybody's included in the Sarah La'azazel, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda says that the Kohen Gadol is the owner, is one of the, is Shayach, but this is his Korbin, and he can do Semicha on it because it involves his sins as well. So now, back in the Gemara, Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Rabbi Yirmiyah v'azlu taimayu, that this machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon about can the Kohen Gadol be doing Semicha on the Sarah La'azazel. This is, it's Pashat machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda about who the Sarah La'azazel is for. Tisani, we're learning a brisa. Friends, I'm going to read you a pasuk. The pasuk says, "V'chiper es mikdash hakodesh ves oil moyed ves hamizbeach yichaper." That's one part of the pasuk. The pasuk then concludes, "V'al kohanim v'al kol am hakol yichaper." The first part of the pasuk is talking about the Par V'Sarah of Yom Kippur that are done in the Kodesh HaKodashim that are mechaper for Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashah. The second part of the pasuk is talking about the Sarah La'azazel that's mechaper for all of the other sins other than Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashah. So the Sani, we're learning a brisa when in the first part of the pasuk that's talking about Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashah, the Par Yom HaKippurim, the Sarah Yom HaKippurim, V'chiper es Mikdash HaKodesh ze lefnai v'lefnim. It's mechaper for somebody who's tamei and accidentally went into the Kodesh HaKodashim. Ves oil moyed ze heichel. Somebody who's tamei and accidentally went into the heichel. Mizbeach kimashmo, or if he was a kohen and he was in the middle of avodah on the Mizbeach, Yichaper lo azaris, as well as somebody who's tamei and accidentally went into the azaris. If you're wondering, isn't the Mizbeach in the azara? I think it's talking about a scenario where he's basically doing the avodah on the Mizbeach and then he becomes tamei while he's doing the avodah and he quickly runs out. So it'll be mitar, or maybe he remembered that maybe he was tamei from before and then he was doing avodah and he remembered that he was tamei and it was on the Mizbeach, but he wasn't there long enough in the Azara to be considered. He wasn't long enough in the Azara, but he was doing the avodah on the Mizbeach. It's a pretty technical example, I think. But anyways, all of those cases we're talking about Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashah. Okay, so we're saying that the Par Yom HaKippurim for the Kohanim, the Sarah Yom HaKippurim for everybody else. I'm mechaper for all of these examples. Somebody was tamei and he accidentally went to the Kodesh HaKodashim or the Eichel or the Azor, was on the Mizbeach, whatever. Now, in terms of being mechaper for all the other mitzvahs, for all the other averas, so the pasuk then talks about Kohanim, Kimashman, that's talking about the Kohanim. Al kol am akol, Elu Yisrael, Yichaper, Elu Alevim, Hushvu Kulon, L'chapara Achas. So when it comes to the Sarah La'azazel, for all other averas, Kohanim, Yisraelim, Leviim are all together. Shemiskapin b'Sarah Mishtaleach, that they get kapara from the Sarah Mishtaleach. Tiv Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, who says that the Sarah Mishtaleach is for everybody. It's mechaper for everybody, including the Kohanim, for all other mitzvahs other than Tumas Mikdash v'Kodashah. The Kohanim only have their own Korbin for Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav in the Kodesh HaKodashim. But for everything else, they're together with all the other Yidden. Reb Shimon disagrees, and he says, Kishem, She'em, Shadam, Sa'ir, Hanaisa Bifnim, Mechaper al Yisrael, al Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav. Reb Shimon says, look, for everybody other than the Kohanim, the Sa'ir Hanaisa Bifnim, the Sa'ir L'Hashem, the Zrikas Dam, right? Dam Sa'ir Hanaisa Bifnim, the Zrikas Adam, or the splitting of the blood in front of the arm, but the blood in the Kodesh HaKodashim from the Sa'ir L'Hashem is Mechaper for Yisra, for the Yidden, for non-Kohanim, Al Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav, Kach Dam Apar Mechaper Al Kohanim, Al Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav. So the Par Yom HaKippurim accomplishes the same thing. It's Mechaper for Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav, but only for the Kohanim. For the Kohanim, you have the Par Hanaisa B'Fnim, and for everybody else is the Sa'ir Hanaisa B'Fnim. Ucheshem shevidoy shel Sa'ir HaMishtalech Mechaper HaYisrael B'Shar Averis. And says Reb Shimon, the confession that the Kohen does on the Sa'ir HaMishtalech for all of the other Yidden, the non-Kohanim, for other Averis, Kach Vidoy Shel Par, so also the confession that the Kohen Gadol does on the Par, Anaisa Bifnim, that confession, Mechaper al Kohanim, B'Shar Averis, is what's Mechaper for the Kohanim, for other Averis. So Reb Shimon says that the Sa'ir HaMishtalech, the Sa'ir LaAzazel, is only for non-Kohanim, according to Reb Shimon. The Kohanim, their atonement comes from the Vidoy on the Par Yom HaKippurim, for the Kohanim. And therefore, since the Kohanim are not the owners of the Sa'ir HaMishtalech, therefore, Aharon HaKohen cannot do Semicha on the Sa'ir HaMishtalech because it's not his Korbin. He's not the owner of it. It's not for him. Reb Shimon Avadai Hushvu. Now the Gemara asked, but 1 second, but what about that pasuk? The pasuk had said, Ala Kohanim, Valkol Amakol, Yichaper. We said that's the Kohanim, the Yisraelim, the Levim. We said that when it comes to the Sa'ir Mishtalech, when it comes to all other Averis, Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim, they're all one. They're all together on that. That they can get kapara for all of the other Averis. To which Reb Shimon replies in Hushvu, yes, they are all together in that they can all get kapara for other Averis other than Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav. However, the method in which they get that kapara is going to be different. The bnei kapara ninu, all Yidden, Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim, they're all bnei kapara ninu. They all get kapara for all sins. However, miu kol chad v'chad mechaper b'denafshe. Everybody, though, gets their kapara in their own method, in the method that is for them. For Kohanim, that method is the vidoy on the par hanaisa bifnim. For all other Yidden, that is the vidoy on the Sa'ir HaMishtalech, the Sa'ir LaAzazel. Amazing. So now says the Gemara, the Sikum, in conclusion, the Rabbi Yehuda, Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav, Yisrael Mechaper B'Dam Sa'ir Hanaisa Bifnim, that according to Rabbi Yehuda, when it comes to Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav, the non-Kohanim, they get their kapara with the Dam Sa'ir Hanaisa Bifnim. The Kohanim B'Par Shel Aharon, and the Kohanim get their kapara for Tumas Mikdash V'Kodashav from the Par Hanaisa Bifnim. Now, when it comes to B'Shar Averis, Elu va'elu Mechapre Bevidoy Sa'ir HaMishtalech. According to Rabbi Yehuda, when it comes to all other sins, all of the Yidden, Kohanim, Levim, Yisrael, they're all together. They all get kapar for other Averis from the Sa'ir HaMishtalech, from the Vidoy on the Sa'ir HaMishtalech. Right? V'svada olav v'skol Avonus b'nei Yisrael v'chol pesheim v'chol chatosam, and that is then placed on this goat, and that goat is chucked off the cliff together with all of the sins of everybody, including Kohanim. Reb Shimon, but Reb Shimon disagrees. B'shar averis nami, also when it comes to other averis, non-tumas mikdash v'kadosh of averis, there is still that distinction. Kohanim bevidui depar miskapre, the Kohanim, their kapara comes from the vidui on the par and isa bifnim, not on the sari mishtalech. I have a little more water. Kidekatane, as we learn in the final Mishnah of the first chapter of Masechta Shavuos, Echad Yisrael, ve'echad Kohanim, ve'echad Kohen Mashiach. You have Yisraels, you have Kohanim, you have the Kohen Gadol. Ma bein Yisrael Kohanim v'Kohen Mashiach. What is the difference between the Yisraelim on the one hand and the Kohanim and the Kohen Gadol on the other hand? The only difference is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the only difference is Shedam apar mechaper al Kohanim atumas mikdash v'kadosav zodiv Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the only difference between the Kohanim and everybody else is when it comes to tumas mikdash v'kadosav, their kapara comes from the par anaisa bifnim, from the zrikas adam of the par anaisa bifnim. Other than that, it's the same. By all other averis, everyone is together by the Sarah Mishtaleach. Reb Shimon Omer, Reb Shimon disagrees and he says no. Kishem shedam asoyer anaisa bifnim mechapra Yisrael, kach dam apar mechapra al Kohanim. Kishem sheviduyo shel Sarah Mishtaleach mechapra Yisrael, kach viduyo shel par mechaper al Kohanim. Like we saw earlier, that according to Reb Shimon, just like when it comes to Tumas Mikdash v'Kadoshav, there is a distinction between the Kohanim and everybody else. The Kohanim, their kapara comes from the dam of the par and Isa Bifnim, and everybody else, their kapara is from the dam of the Sarah and Isa Bifnim. Also, when it comes to all other Averis, the Kohanim, their kapara comes from the Vidoy on the par and Isa Bifnim, and everybody else, their kapara comes from the Vidoy on the Sarah Amishtalech, the Sarah Lazazel, and therefore, a big nafkamina, therefore, is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, the Sarah Mishtaleach is also shaykh to the Kohanim. It's their Korbin too. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's not their Korbin. And therefore, the question of can the Kohen Gadol do Semicha on the Sarah Mishtaleach? Well, that relates to the question of, is he the owner of the Korbin or not? According to Rabbi Yehuda, he is one of the owners, right? Everybody, all the Yidden are the owners of the Korbin. And therefore, he can do Semicha on it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Shimon, he can't do Semicha on the Sarah Mishalech because it's not him. It's not for him. And if he's not the Bailim, he can't do Semicha on it. Which is interesting though, because we're going to learn later on that if you have multiple people that bring a Korbin, they would all do Semicha on it, but maybe that's specifically it's probably specifically by a Korbin Yochid though, because also like by the Paril and Davar Shal Tzibur, not everybody's doing it. You have somebody who represents everybody doing it by Korbin Tzibur, I guess. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, V'samchu ziknei ha'eda esidei marosh hapar, that by Paril and Davar Shal Tzibur, the Pasuk says that the ziknei ha'eda, the elders of the congregation, will do Semicha on the cow. There you go. State in Pasuk, it says in the Torah that by Parlam Davar Shal Tzibur, there's Semicha. Par ton Semicha, vein siri avodas kochavim, ton Semicha, tunin Semicha, diver Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says it's the Parlam Davar Shal Tzibur that requires Semicha, and not the Sarah Avodah Zarah, which is what Reb Shimon would have you think. Reb Shimon Omer, par ta'un smicha bezikenim. No, look, the Parlam Davar Shal Tzibur requires smicha with zikenim, with the elders. Ve'ein siri avodas kochavim tunin smicha bezikenim ele be'aharon. Interesting. Reb Shimon says, well, not quite. The Param Davar Shel Tzibur requires smicha with the Zikenim, whereas the Siri Avodas Kochavim doesn't require smicha with the Zikenim, rather with Aharon. However, we have a contradiction to Reb Shimon's Shita Achai, that when the pasuk says, by the Sa'ir La'azazel, what does the pasuk say? V'samach Aharon es shteyadav al rosh asar Achai. V'svada olav es kol avonos b'nei Yisrael v'es kol b'shbein, etc. That Aharon does smicha on the Sa'ir Hachai, the Sa'ir La'azazel, which is interesting, right? Because we've been saying, right, Reb Shimon saying that there's no smicha on the Sa'ir La'azazel. The smicha is on the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah. So it's interesting. Clearly the Torah is saying that there is smicha on the Sa'ir La'azazel. The question is if that's going to be one of the examples of smicha on a communal Korbin. What does that mean? Well, I think the point is that in order for it to be considered a communal Korbin, it would have to be for everybody. It would have to be a Korbin that everybody is shaykh to. Now, according to Reb Shimon, Aharon and the Kohanim are not shaykh to the Sa'ir La'azazel because their kapara is coming from the Vidoy on the Par Hanaisa Bifnim. So this can't be, therefore, an example of smicha on a communal offering, which is a little bit subtle, a little bit tricky because it is a communal offering, but I guess it's not for the whole community as opposed to the Param Davar Shel Tzibur is for everybody. The Sa'ir Avodah Zarah is for everybody, right? Everybody takes part in it. So okay, fine. Anyways, so says the Brisa of Raminu. Hachai, when it comes to the Sa'ir La'azazel, Hachai ta'un smicha ve'en siras avodas kochavim tu'unin smicha div Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda says that it's the Sa'ir La'azazel that requires smicha. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the Sa'ir La'azazel is for everybody. It's even for the Kohanim. So it is a communal tzibur, and Aaron is doing the smicha on the Sa'ir La'azazel for everybody. And that's the smicha by a communal offering, not by the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon Chai ton smicha ba'aharin. Reb Shimon says, no, when it comes to the Sa'ir Achai, that is done by Aharon. But ve'ein siri avodas kochavim tunin smicha ba'aharin ela b'zikenim. But by the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah, the smicha is not just by Aharon, it's by the zikenim. And as Tosfos points out, because Aharon isn't the owner of the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah. Why not? What's the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah? The Sa'ir Avodah Zarah is basically a Param Davar Shel Tzibur, but for Avodah Zarah. That Bezdin ruled, let's say that you're allowed to throw stones on Markulis. So everybody did that. So now you have to bring a Sa'ir Avodah Zarah. Now there's machlokes in the Mishnah. If you remember from Masechta Horayos, there's machlokes in the Mishnah, three-way machlokes, Rav Meir, Reb Yehuda, and Reb Shimon, about who exactly offers the Param Davar Shel Tzibur / Siri Avodah Zarah. It's the same halacha for both. So Reb Meir says, let's talk about the Param Davar Shel Tzibur. Again, it's the same halacha for both. But Param Davar Shel Tzibur, who offers the Param Davar Shel Tzibur? Reb Meir says the Sanhedrin offers the Param Davar Shel Tzibur for everybody. One Param Davar Shel Tzibur offered by the Sanhedrin for everybody. Rabbi Yehuda says every single shevet offers their own Param Davar Shel Tzibur. Reb Shimon says every shevet offers their own Param Davar Shel Tzibur, plus the Sanhedrin also offers another Param Davar Shel Tzibur. So there's 13, right? 12, one for each shevet and one for the Sanhedrin. So according to Reb Shimon, there are 13. The point being that each shevet is offering their own Param Davar Shel Tzibur. And the Kohen Gadol isn't in every single shevet. But the Sanhedrin representing all, right, according to Reb Shimon, the Sanhedrin also brings the Param Davar Shel Tzibur, and they after all are the ones who made the incorrect judgment that triggers this Param Davar Shel Tzibur, and they, as the representatives of everybody, will do smicha on the Param Davar Shel Tzibur, and the same for the Seirei Avodah Zarah. So according to Reb Shimon, it is the Zikenim who are doing the smicha and the Seirei Avodah Zarah. So what's the contradiction? The contradiction is that just a second ago, Reb Shimon had said that the Zikanim are doing Semicha by the Parim Davar Shel Tzibur, but by the Sarah Avodah Zarah, it's not the Zikanim, it's Aharon. But now he just said that when it comes to the Sarah LaAzazel, it's Aharon who's doing the Semicha alone. But by the Sarah Avodah Zarah, it is the Zikanim who are doing the Semicha. So by the Sarah Avodah Zarah, is it Aharon who's doing the Semicha, like you said initially? Or is it the Zikanim who are doing the Semicha? Rav Sheshes says, Rav Sheshes, V'tizbra, Rav Sheshes says, 1 second, before you get all excited, do you really think that first brisa where it says that Aharon's the one doing the Semicha on the Syria Avodah Zarah, you think that that's correct? Reb Shimon says, Semicha bebailin ba'inon. That Semicha needs to be done by the owner, and right, as we saw earlier, that was his response to Reb Yehuda, the Semicha needs to be done by the owner, and as I mentioned from Tosfos, the Kohen Gadol is not the owner of the Syria Avodah Zarah. Elatrit Sachi rather explain it like this: Hapar, when the pasuk says by Parim Davar Shel Tzibur Apar, Parton Semicha, the Parim Davar Shel Tzibur requires Semicha, ve'ein Sirei Avodas Kuchavim Tunin Semicha de Reb Yehuda. According to Reb Yehuda, the Syria Avodah Zarah does not require Semicha. Parim Davar Shel Tzibur does. Syria Avodah Zarah does not, according to Reb Yehuda. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon Hachai, he learns it out from the pasuk by the Sarah Mishtaleach. Chai Ton Semicha be'Aharon. Yes, the Torah says that there is Semicha by the Sarah Mishtaleach. Ve'ein Syria Avodas Kochavim Tunin Semicha be'Aharon el b'Zikanim. But when it comes to Syria Avodah Zarah, the Semicha is not just by Aharon, rather it's by all of the Zikanim, it's by the Zikanim, by the Syria Avodah Zarah, and that's an example of Semicha by Korbin Sibor because it's for all of the Sibor represented by the Zikanim, as opposed to, according to Reb Shimon, the Sarah Mishtaleach, it can't be an example of Semicha by Korbin Sibor because it's not for the whole Sibor. And you have a Aharon who's doing Semicha there and it's not shaykh to him. So it can't be the example that we're looking for of Semicha by a communal Korbin. Reb Shimon the Reb Yehuda, and this is what Reb Shimon is saying to Reb Yehuda, Sirei Avodas Kochavim Bou Semicha. That the Sirei Avodah Zarah does require Semicha. It is the second example of a communal offering that requires Semicha. V'ishmi'alach de lo ba'u Semicha. And if you heard that by Sirei Avodah Zarah it doesn't require Semicha, it means be'aharenu d'shmi'alach. It means that the Sirei Avodah Zarah does not require Semicha by Aharon. Umi'uta, right, so it's not from Aharon, but it is with the Zikanim, however, by the par, by the Sirei Avodah Zarah. Umi'uta me'achayu, and the diuk is not like what you're saying, Rabbi Yehuda, from the par of the Parim Davar Shel Tzibur. No, it's from the chai. It's from the Sarah Mishtaleach. To say the Sarah Mishtaleach requires Semicha with just Aharon, but by the Sarah Avodah Zarah, it requires Semicha with the Zikanim. Just going to drink a shtickle more water. Frag the Gemara, the Rabbi Yehuda, Lama li l'mautinu mikra. According to Rabbi Yehuda, why does the Sarah Avodas Kochavim have to be excluded from a pasuk? The Motinu, I'm sorry, the V'ha Amar Ravina, Gemire Shtei Smichos B'tzibur. After all, Ravina says that there's Halacha Moshe Misina, that there's only 2 instances of Semicha by Korbin Sibor, and therefore, if it's Halacha Moshe Misina, that there's only 2 instances of Semicha by Korbin Sibor, And according to you, Rabbi Yehuda, those two instances are Parim Davar Shel Tzibur, which is written explicitly in the Torah, and the second one is the Sari Mishtalech. So Zo, you have your two examples. I don't need to exclude anything else. There's no more than two. Stop looking. Girsa Ba'alma. There's two ways of understanding what this means. One is to say that it isn't actually halacha l'Moshe Misina, it's just a regular halacha, and it's actually learned out from these psukim. And we need the psukim to teach that we're specifically talking about Parim Davar Shel Tzibur and Sari Mishtalech. Alternatively, you could say that no, it is halacha l'Moshe Misina, and the psukim are just an asmachta. Okay, fine. V'Reb Shimon. How does Reb Shimon know that it's specifically the example of Siri Avodah Zarah where there's smicha? We've learned that it's not the Sari Mishtalech. How do we know that it is the Siri Avodah Kochavim? Nafkalon midatanya, that we learn it out from a brisa. V'samach yada arosh asayir, that by the Sa'ir Nasi, when a king sins, let's say he's Mechal Shabbos by accident, so everybody else, all other people other than the king, would bring a kispa v'sira, either a female sheep or a female goat as a Korbin chatas. He brings a Sa'ir, the Sa'ir Nasi. And it says there in the pasuk that he brings a Sa'ir, and then it says v'samach yada arosh asayir, and he does smicha arosh asayir. Could you say arosho on its head, because it already says it's a goat? So why say al asayir? It's teaching about another sa'ir, that there's another example of smicha by a sa'ir. The rabbis sa'ir nachshon the smicha the divrei Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, what's that other example of a sa'ir where there's going to be smicha? The sa'ir nachshon. According to Rabbi Yehuda, by the Nisayin, the first 12 days of Nisan in the second year in the wilderness, every day, of course, as we know, another Nasi would offer korbanis, and those chatases, those sa'irs required smicha. Reb Shimon Omer says, Reb Shimon the Rabbah Sari Avodas Kochavim, the smicha is coming to include the Sari Avodah Zarah, that the Sari Avodah Zarah requires smicha, according to Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon Omer, that Reb Shimon would say, Kol chatos shenichnas damam lifnim, all chatos hapnimios tuna smicha require smicha. Whether it's the Parim Davar Shel Tzibur, the Parkoin Mashiach, the Siri Avodah Zarah. Lamali limema shahaya. Why do I need that Reb Yehuda, that Reb Shimon would say? What do we need that for? Simana ba'ama. It's just kind of a way to remember that it's the Sarah Naisa, that's the Sarah Avodah Zarah that is included for the Semicha and not the Sarah Nachshon, because after all of the Chatos HaPnimios require Semicha. Fine. Ve'emo Sarah Naisa B'fnim. Why is Reb Shimon assuming that the Sa'ir that requires Semicha, right? We say by a Sa'ir Nasi, it requires smicha. And what's the other sa'ir? When it says al rosh sa'ir, what sa'ir is it referring to? Rabbi Shimon says the sa'ir avodah zarah. How do you know it's not the sa'ir anaisa b'fnim, the sa'ir la Hashem an Yom Kippur, which is in the lifnai v'lifnim? So dumya the sa'ir nasi the mechaper al averis mitzvah yedua. Well, because what is the Sa'ir Nasi coming to include? What Sa'ir? A Sa'ir that is similar to it, that it's coming to atone for something specific. Just like the Sa'ir Nasi did something specific. He was Mechal Shabbos, Yed Chelev, whatever it is. So here also, we're talking about Sa'ir Avodah Zarah. So we know what you did, Sa'ir Avodah Zarah. But the Sa'ir La Hashem on Yom Kippur is for Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav, where there was a Yediyah B'Tchila and there was no Yediyah B'Sof. It's something that is unknown. The person doesn't even realize that he did anything wrong. That is not what we're including for smicha from the Sa'ir Nasi. L'Ravina de Omar Gmirei Shtei Smichos Betzibur Krai Lamali. Now, according to Reb Shimon, why do I need psukim to teach me the Sa'ir Avodah Zarah? After all, Ravina says that it is Alach Moshe Misinai that there are two instances of smicha by a Korbin tzibur. So why do I need psukim? Just learn it out based on that halacha Moshe Misinai. So Itzrich, Hilchas of Itzrich Krai, I need both of them. I need the halacha Moshe Misinai to tell me that there are two instances of smicha by a communal offering, and I also need the psukim. De'i mikra, because if I would rely only on the psukim, I would draw the wrong conclusion. I would think that actually there are three instances of smicha by a communal offering. Havamina, I would think zifchei shamei tzibur. I would think that zifchei shamei tzibur, the kizbei atzeres also, I would have thought that the kizbei atzeres also have smicha. Ki kasha masnisin dach pircha d'chol ha-menachos baos am Reb Shimon shlosh minin tunan shalosh mitzvahs. Like we asked in the perek kol ha-menachos baos matzah. That in the perek, in the fifth perek of Masechta Menachos kol ha-menachos baos matzah, we had asked the question, right? It's a little bit funny how to read this. Havamin, I would have thought zifchei shametzibur. I would have thought that zifchei shametzibur also would require smicha. Tikasha masnisin, like the question that we asked on the Mishnah, the achpirka d'chol ha-menachos bos, in the fifth perek, the perek of kol ha-menachos bos matzah, on the Mishnah that says Amr Reb Shimon shlosha minin, that there are three types of korbanos that we're talking about: the kizbei atzeres, the asher mitzora, and the Korbin shlomim. Tun and shalosh mitzvahs require three mitzvahs. That's tnufa when it's alive, tnufa when it's dead, and smicha, and nesachim. Anyways, on that question we ask, skip the next three words, v'yehu zifchei shamei tzibur tun and smicha. We said, well, I would argue that zifchei shamei tzibur should also require smicha, mikav v'chomer, from the following kav v'chomer, mashal meyachid, when it comes to the shlomim of an individual, she'ein tunin tenufa chaim, that the shalmei yachid, a regular shlom, does not require tenufa when it's alive. It requires tenufa chazev ashok after it's dead, but not when it's alive. And yet, tunin smicha, you do smicha by a regular shlomim. Smicha chaim when it's alive. So therefore, I would think that if regular shlomim requires smicha, certainly zifchei shamei tzibur should also require smicha. So itzrich azel. So therefore, if I wouldn't have had, nachon. So itzrich hilchasa. Therefore, I need the halacha of Moshe Misinai to tell me no. There are only two instances of communal korbanos that have smicha, not three. There's two instances, not three. Don't include zifchei shamei tzibur with that kav v'chomer. And if all we had was the halacha of Moshe Misinai to say that there are two instances of communal offerings that require smicha, lo yadinu nei ninu, I wouldn't know which ones they are. Okay, obviously I would know Parim Davar Shal Tzibur, it says it explicitly, but what's the second one? Kamash malon dumid desayir nasi the mechaper alaveros mitzvah yedua. Therefore I have by desayir nasi it says v'samach yadu al rosh hasayir, when it could have said al rosho, but it says al rosh hasayir to include Siri Avodah Zarah, which is coming for a specific Avera, just like the Sarah Nasi is coming for a specific Avera. Sheesh. And with that, we wrap up the machlekes between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda of what are the two examples of smicha by a communal offering. Rabbi Yehuda says it's the Parlim Davar Shal Tzibur and Yisar HaMishtalech, the Sar L'Azazel, according to Rabbi Yehuda, and according to Reb Shimon, it's the Parlim Davar Shal Tzibur and the Seirei Avodah Zarah. Now, the next section of the Mishnah had said, Kol Korbanos HaYachid, all of the individual Korbanos, Te'un and Smicha requires Smicha Chutz, Mi, Bechor, Meiser, Pesach, the exceptions being Bechor, Meiser, and Pesach do not require Smicha. The Rabbi said Korbanu. In the context of Smicha by a Korbin Shlomim, it says Korbanu 3 times. The first time it's Korbanu v'lo Bechor, the Shlomim not a Bechor. I could have made the following logical argument. I I could have argued, look, a bechor is kadosh from the time that it's born. A firstborn animal, from the second it's born, it's kadosh with kedushas bechor. It's going to be a Korbin. You give it to the kohen. The kohen's going to offer it as a Korbin. So if by a Korbin shlamim, which isn't born that way, it requires semicha, certainly the Korbin bechor, which from the time that it's born, it's already kadosh, should require semicha. Talmud lomar korbano v'lo bechor. Now, shlamim, not a bechor. Korbano v'lo meiser. She'achov alo dinu. Umashlamim she'ein mikachin lefneim v'lachreim tunin smicha meiser she'mikadesh lefanav v'lachar v'eno din she'toin smicha. I could have made the argument, right? This is the same Mishnah, the last Mishnah in Bechoros that we referenced yesterday. And I looked it up earlier, and it's the previous Mishnah, the second to last Mishnah, Masechta Bechoros, describes how Meiser Be'ema is done. You take all the animals, you put them in a pen with a small little opening so that only one sheep can get out at a time. That only one animal can get out at a time. And then, as each animal goes out, you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then when you get up to 10, you mark it with some red paint and you say, you are Meiser. Now, what if you made a mistake in the counting and when you got up to 9, you said 10? And then you said, wait. And then by 10, you said 9. And by 11, you said 10. So all three of them are Kadosh. So we're saying if by Meiser, where not only is the Meiser Kadosh, but has the ability also to make the one before and after Kadosh, so, which is not the case, that's not shaykh to Korbin Shlamim. And yet by Korbin Shlamim there's Semicha. I would think certainly when there's all this extra Kedusha by Meiser Be'ema, it should require Semicha. Talmud lomar Korbano v'lo Meiser. Not Meiser. Korbano v'lo Pesach. She'achol v'alo dinu. Uma Shlamim she'eno ba'amod ve'avei. Tunin Semicha Pesach shu ba'amod ve'avei. Enu din she'ton Semicha. I could make the argument that shlamim, which I don't have an obligation to bring a shlamim, I can bring a shlamim whenever I want, and yet it requires smicha. Certainly, Korbin Pesach, where I have an obligation to bring it, it should require smicha. Talmud lomar, and Korbano v'lo Pesach. But 1 second, not so fast. We're making it seem like shlamim, it's like, it's only a shlamim and it requires smicha. It's not only a shlamim. It requires tenufa. It requires nisachim. These are things that don't apply to the Bechor Meiser and Pesach. So it's not just a shlamim. Shlamim is pretty serious stuff as well. And yeah, it requires smicha too. It requires tenufa, it requires nisachim, it requires smicha. And maybe the Bechor, the Meiser, and the Pesach don't require smicha. So the Gemara says, Taka, you're right. We don't need to exclude Bechor, Meiser, and Pesach. We wouldn't have necessarily assumed that they should require smicha. Kray asmachta be'alma. These krayim of Korbin, it's just an asmachta. It's not actually, we're not actually excluding them from these. We don't need to exclude them from smicha. Ella Kray Lamali, okay, fine. But then what do we actually learn out from Korbano? What, we should be learning something from it. What is it? Korbano, v'lo Korbin Chavero. Your Korbin requires smicha. You don't do smicha on your friends, Korbin. You can't have a shaliach do smicha for you. Korbano v'lo Korbin ovdei kochavim. If an ovdei kochavim is bringing a Korbin, there's no smicha. Korbano l'rabos kol ba'alei Korbin the smicha. And if you have multiple people bringing a Korbin together, each one of them is going to do smicha. Friends, that was Daf Tzadi Beis of Masechta Menachos. Well, that ended up kind of being a kind of intense daf. I thought it might, it's kachim. It's a kachim daf. Kachim, just takes, there's just so many moving pieces that have to be talked through. That it just takes so much time and effort. But it was a great daf. Yeah, it just ended up being a really long one. I'll go upon him. We discussed smicha, which is exciting because it's one of those parts of the korbanos that I feel like are less talked about, and it's like around, and it's like there is this concept of smicha by korbanos, but like when do you do it? Where do you do it? How do you do it? I assume we're going to talk about how we do it, but we got to talk about when you do it, and that is by communal offerings, there are only two instances of smicha. Everyone agrees that one of them is Pailim Dovish Tzibur, because the pasuk says it. The machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon is on the second instance. Rabbi Yehuda says the second instance is Sar Lazazel, and after all, the Torah does say that Aharon does smicha on the Sar Lazazel, so that everybody agrees with that there is smicha by the Sar Lazazel. The question is that the second instance of smicha by a communal Korbin? Rabbi Yehuda says it is the second instance, because after all, the Sar Lazazel is for everybody, including the Kohanim. And yeah, the Kohen Gadol is doing smicha on the Sar Lazazel, on this communal Korbin, and he's doing it for everybody. Rabbi Shimon says no, the Kohanim, their kapara for all other sins other than Tumas Mikdash V'Kedashim comes from the Vidoy on the Paranais B'Fnim. So therefore, the smicha that is done on the Sar Lazazel cannot be the second example of smicha on a communal offering, since Aharon is not the owner of that offering. The second example of smicha on a communal offering is that the Zekanim do smicha on a Sa'ir of a Dezar. And that is the second example of smicha on a communal Korbin, the smicha of the Zekanim on the Sa'ir of a Dezar. And then at the end, that was kind of 90 or 95% of the daf. And at the end, we discussed which private offerings require smicha. That is all private offerings, right? There are basically 8 kinds of private korbanos: 3 kachim, 5 kachim kalim. Only 3 of those do not require smicha. Bechor Ma'aser and Pesach do not require smicha. Chatas, Asham, Ola, Shlomim, Toda do require smicha. Friends, that was Daf Tzadi Beis, Daf 92 of Masechta Menachos. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day. Cheers.